Honorable Senators, I rise today and give my full support to a creation of a Jewish Heritage Month in Canada. On a personal note, I want to thank Senator Wetson for giving me this opportunity to be the critic of this bill. I am really proud to be a critic of this bill. Recognizing a people's contribution to Canada is important because it highlights a community and the work the community has done in Canada. The contributions and achievements of that community are highlighted, and Canadians learn of the contributions that community has brought to Canada. We also recognize the history of that community in Canada. It is so important that in a multicultural society to recognize the diverse stories of every community. Right now, we recognize Black History Month and Asian History Month. Only through understanding of each other can we build a better Canada. That is why I support this important bill, because it allows us to highlight and understand one another. Honorable Senators, I want to thank Senator Frum for presenting this bill in the chamber, and I want to thank her for the work she's done to bring this bill to our chamber. Honorable Senators, I arrived in Canada in 1975. Arrived here as a qualified lawyer but with no job prospects. It was one of my greatest fears that I would arrive in Canada as a refugee and not be able to work in my chosen profession of law. There was one individual, Jack Kowarski, who believed in me. He was the one who gave me a real start, even though I had no experience in Canada. He did not look at my background, my faith, the color of my skin, or anything else. Instead, he looked at how he could support someone who was new in our country. It was then that I learned that Jack Kowarski's values came from his Jewish faith and the community he was raised in. The Jewish faith community taught him that he should always support the people of the community that he lives in, that it is important to contribute to the people in the space you occupy. For that, I am forever grateful to Jack Kowarski. Honorable Senators, if there is a community whose heritage must be recognized in Canada, it is the Jewish community. The Jewish people's contributions to Canada cannot be overstated. In fact, their very existence in this country is a major achievement that every other minority community can appreciate. Jewish heritage begins in this country before Canada even existed as a nation. After the fall of New France, Jewish people were finally able to openly settle in Canada. They no longer had to pretend to be Catholics to gain entry and acceptance into Canada. The Jewish people were the first people who had to force Canadians to reflect on how to interact with other communities. They boldly forced that reflection upon Canadians by establishing Shearith, Israel, North America's first synagogue in Montreal in 1768. Suddenly, Canadians needed to consider if they wanted a pluralistic and inclusive Canada or an exclusive Canada. It is that very reflection set upon by the immigration of Jews to Canada that has set the pathway towards the inclusive country that we live in today. Jewish heritage set the foundation of what Canada's inclusive ideology is built upon. Without that foundation, other minority communities may have had no place here. And what a tragedy that would have been. But honorable Senators, as we all know, being a minority in Canada is not always easy. It is a constant uphill fight for recognition and equality. Yet the Jewish community has never shied away from facing this challenge. They were the first to lead the way for other minority communities immigrating to Canada. In 1807, Ezekiel Hart from Trois-Rivières became the first Jew in the entire British Empire to be elected into office. Unfortunately, he was denied his seat on the basis of his religion. He was told that he could not take office because the oath of office had the words "on the true faith of a Christian" written in them. After countless anti-Semitic letters and presentations, unfortunately, Parliament expelled him. Ezekiel est donc à rentrer à Trois-Rivières pour faire face aux citoyens de sa...
In order to face Ezekiel went back to Trois-Rivières and faced the people of his riding, but Trois-Rivières did not let this blatant anti-Semitism stop them from putting their faith in Ezekiel. He was elected again in 1808. This time, he took the oath in the way that all Christians took the oath of office. Again, that was not enough. He was expelled a second time because of his faith. Honorable Senators, that is the political history of Jewish people in Canada. Persistence in the face of persecution. Resilience in the face of anti-Semitism.
Comes to Jewish immigration. In 1939, during the start of the Holocaust, Frederick Blair, the then director of the immigration branch, was asked how many Jewish people would be allowed into Canada after the war. And I'm very embarrassed to tell you that he replied, "None is too many." None is too many. That was the common attitude toward Jewish people during the worst genocide in human history. Yet, despite that attitude, or perhaps in spite of that attitude, in our parliament today, we have a number of parliamentarians of Jewish heritage. We have the fourth largest Jewish population in the world, and we have nearly 6,000 Holocaust survivors in Montreal alone. Persistence in the face of persecution, resilience in the face of anti-Semitism. Honorable Senators, when a community from any part of the world comes to Canada, we encourage them to hold on to their values. We know that their contribution to Canada comes directly from their values. Those values become Canadian values. It is the greatest strength of our country. Honorable Senators, the persistence and resilience of the Jewish community is built into the values of Canada. The value of never giving up when things get tough. The value of staying strong in one's conviction in the face of adversity. The values of education, hard work, and community. It is those values which have led to so many success stories amongst Jewish Canadians. J'aimerais vous faire part d'un de ces...
I would like to share one of those stories with you. In 1919, Max and Esther Bergman arrived from Ehrlich, Russia, to Canada. They came with nothing but the willingness to learn, the willingness to work, and a simple bagel recipe. After 17 years of hard work, Max opened his own business in 1939, a Russian bagel bakery, at the cost of $900 a month and a $10 down payment, a fortune in those times. 3 families moved into the small flat above the bakery: the Bergmans, the Newmans, and the Rabinoviches. Everyone worked together to contribute to the success of the bakery.
Would be paid. Esther would host a large feast for everyone and thank them for their hard work. 3 families moved into a small flat above the bakery: the Bergmans, the Newmans, and the Rabinoviches. Everyone worked together to contribute to the success of the bakery. On Thursdays, after all the staff would be paid, Esther would host a large feast for everyone and thank them for their hard work. At the end of the feast, Max would ask his staff for a favor. They wanted to work the next day. He needed some of their wages to buy more flour. Everyone contributed, no questions asked. They all understood that the only way everyone could survive was if everyone helped one another. No one went without. Aujourd'hui, la petite fille de Max.
Today, The grandson of Max Bergman owns Bagel King, Muffins, Michel's Baguette, and now Second Cup. It all started with a bagel recipe from Russia and the value of taking care of one another in good times and in bad times. Honorable Senators, right now we are not in good times. Intolerance towards minority communities is increasing. Immigration policies of historically more liberal states are becoming increasingly more restrictive. In 2013, Statistics Canada reported that 56% of all religiously based hate crimes were targeted at Jews. Hate crimes towards Muslims and other minority communities have also increased significantly.
Tremendous turmoil over the centuries. If there is any silver lining that can be derived from these terrible instances, it is a deep understanding we rise and fall together. The Jewish community is very diverse. They are the Sephardic Jews, the Ashkenazi Jews, Moroccan Jews, and Ethiopian Jews, the Orthodox Jews and Reform Jews. What binds all of them together is not only the name of their faith, but an understanding that communities all rise and fall together. It is a profound innate understanding that we can learn from, that Canadians rise and fall together. Only through working together to combat hatred and bigotry, with the best interests of our community in mind, can we all rise together. Like the Jewish people, despite all of our diversity, Canadians are also bound together. Honorable Senators, I mentioned that the Jewish people have often led the charge for equality on behalf of all minority communities. In the late 1960s, they did exactly that. During that time, anti-Semitism was once again on the rise in this country. For 3.5 years, the Jewish community worked diligently to pass anti-hate propaganda legislation. The Jewish community worked first to add religion as a characteristic of an identifiable group, and then later passed anti-genocide legislation that included those identifiable groups. There were intense arguments about how adding religion to an identifiable group would pose a threat to freedom of expression, even though it was already determined that it would not. Yet, despite the unwarranted opposition, the Canadian Jewish communities worked all together to lobby the government to pass this incredibly important bill. They forced the government to take the moral stance that hatred would not be tolerated in Canada. It was first introduced on November 11, 1966, as S-49, then as S-5, then as S-21 in 1969. It finally passed in this chamber on June 5, 1970 in a vote of 40 to 22. Today, because of the efforts of the Jewish community and the efforts of countless others, we have anti-hate propaganda legislation in this country that protects religious minorities. Honorable Senators, I started this speech by talking about the great contributions that the Jewish community has made to Canada. In communities across Canada, there are schools and hospitals that have been made possible because of the contributions of the Jewish community and Jewish families. I would like to give just one example and talk about one particular, the Mount Sinai Hospital in Ontario. The Mount Sinai Hospital has the best maternity ward in Canada. In fact, they are the best in many different areas in Canada. Millions of dollars have been invested into Mount Sinai Hospital by many generous Jewish families. And I'm very proud to say that amongst us, we have Senator Weston and Senator Frum, who have worked very hard for the people in their area and worked hard for Mount Sinai Hospital. Mount Sinai Hospital is a prime example of the Jewish community's contribution to Canada. Only 8% of the patients in Mount Sinai Hospital are Jewish. Yet, the only reason that it stands is because of the contribution of generous Jewish families. The Jewish community has shown that looking after their own community also means looking after all Canadians. That is the culture of philanthropy that exists in the Jewish community. I have seen this not only on the large scale, like offering services and infrastructure, but on a very personal level. I have found in my life, whenever I have needed support, when I have had some real problems, it's like men like Art Wertlib and Mike Weintraub who have stood by me. Both men have reminded me repeatedly through their actions that faith is not a sword that should separate us, but rather a shield that should bring us together. Honorable Senators, recognizing Jewish Heritage Month in Canada is more than just recognizing the achievements and tremendous contributions of the Jewish people here. Senator Fraser has already mentioned the incredible culture of generosity and philanthropy within the Canadian Jewish community, and I echo that. It is also about recognizing the tremendous hardship that the Jewish people have endured both within Canada and outside. It is about recognizing those values taught in the synagogue or passed down for the millennia through family members. It is about understanding that we need to work every day to ensure that those values and the values of every minority community remain part of the fabric of our country. It is about not repeating the mistakes of our past. It is about giving every community the opportunity to set down its roots here in Canada, to contribute and thrive. It is about standing up to hate in all of its forms. That's the story of the Jewish heritage in Canada, and I proudly support it. Honorable Senators, I humbly ask you that you also support this bill. When we pass this bill, we will be saying to the Jewish community, we salute the work you have done here in Canada. I would like to leave you with a quote from the Holy Quran. It is a quote that sits by my bedside, and to me it describes why we have months that recognize different communities. The quote in the Quran is, "O mankind, we created you from a single pair of male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes, that ye may know each other, not that ye may despise each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of Allah is he who is the most righteous of you." Thank you very much.